When the words coming out of your mouth are true and you believe what you're saying, that's authenticity. Welcome to I Am Nineveh. I Am is all about being proud of who you are, being bold enough, brave enough, courageous enough to show up as you are, whoever that may be. I, for one, am Nineveh. So, welcome to my show. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much. Today, what are we going to talk about? The number one thing that'll hold you back. I feel like a lot of podcasters, people who produce content, we all say, the number one thing. Maybe a bad habit from my news days, I don't know. But seriously, one of the things, we'll just say one of the things, but for purposes of being dramatic, the number one thing that'll hold you back in life, and I really do think this is a big deal, y'all, is trying to be too relatable. And that's what we're going to discuss today. What does it mean to be too relatable? I mean, think about that. The term too relatable. Relatable? You're too relatable. You're not relatable enough. You see where I'm going with this? Who gets to decide when the degree of relatability is too much? We all have different opinions, so who gets to decide? How about not caring what somebody thinks? And we'll dive into that. But when we say relatable, and we dive into that word and we dissect it, relatable to what? Relatable to who? Relatable according to who? Because here's what I know. It is impossible. It is impossible. Not a lot of things are impossible, but it is impossible to relate to everyone in this world. Yet we continue our attempts to do so. You know, I think relatability has got its pros and it's got its cons. And today we're going to talk about the cons of being relatable, or too relatable in this case. What are the pros? Let's talk about the positives. The positives are being relatable creates connection between myself and you, right? Like if I'm not relatable on any level at all, what do you think of me? Never mind, don't tell me that. I don't care. No, I'm just kidding. But relatability is important in terms of creating that connection between human and human, right? It humanizes you. It humanizes you, and that's important. And it makes you more likable. And we all want to be liked, don't we? But what are the cons? That's what I want to dive into today. The cons are they can bury your self-worth if you're not careful. If you are too focused, if you are hyper-focused on being relatable because you want to create connection, because you want to humanize yourself to others, because you want to be more likable, there is a danger in that when it comes to your self-worth. Chasing connection in excess, especially online. I think a lot of us are doing it online. So what is the intention here when we say that we're chasing connection? But when we're chasing connection in excess, especially on social media, especially online, that is going to lead to isolation. Isolation will trap you in a mental prison. Alone with your thoughts, back and forth, you're going to go with no way out because you have been seeking connection in all the wrong places in an effort to be relatable to people who don't even know you. And let's face it, don't care about you. You don't know these people. They don't know you on a deep, deep level like your family or your partner, your kids, the people who matter the most to you, right? Your colleagues, your coworkers, your mentors. But we are seeking connection in all the wrong places, especially online. And when we do that, it leads to isolation. And a lot of times we do it because we want to be validated. And validation is part of the con of trying to be more likable in terms of relatability. Trying to humanize yourself to everyone is going to lead to have lead you to having an identity built on quicksand. And if you're listening consecutively to my podcast, you know that I just talked about that in terms of not building a life built on quicksand. And a lot of that has to do with your identity. But when you are trying to humanize yourself, in terms of being relatable, right? Creating that connection. I want to make sure that you know that I'm a human too. I'm just like you. That will lead you to having an identity built on quicksand. Humanizing yourself, that's a tough word to say like multiple times in a row, by the way. Humanizing yourself for everyone else means that you will risk watering down your desires, dampening your dreams, and even feeling guilty and shameful about being ambitious. Ambition, by the way, is not for average people. None of us were born average. We were taught average. Ambition requires excellence. And when we attempt to humanize ourselves and become relatable to everyone and everything, we actually lose ourselves in the process. You begin to wonder, who am I? What do I desire? What do I want? There's a lot of confusion that begins to happen. You're too busy being relatable to everyone else that you forgot about yourself in the process. And then lastly, trying to make yourself more likable. Let's actually talk about that. That's a tough one. It actually reminds me of high school. I couldn't understand why I wasn't popular. All I wanted to be was popular back in high school. I went to 3 different high schools, and I wasn't popular to any of them. It's not easy to be the new kid on the block. I didn't belong in the popular group. I couldn't even crack into the popular group. I didn't even meet the criteria of the popular group. What is the criteria? Probably has changed in today's day and age in terms of being in the popular crowd. What's trendy? But back then, when I was a teenager and life was a little more simple before all the social media madness, I know, gotta love it and hate it, right? The criteria of being in the popular group looked something like this. You had to be pretty, you had to look a certain way, you had to be a cheerleader. I'm just talking about in terms of girls, right? You had to be in a certain group. Now, in today's world, it might not even be popular to be a cheerleader anymore. Maybe it's popular to be something else. But here's the point. I think at the root of wanting to be likable is that we want acceptance. Thanks for tuning into my show. As the co-owner and COO of Superhuman, I want to invite you to learn more about how we help high-achieving men and women just like you become top performers in their bodies and minds. Book a free call with my team. Go to superhuman.com to get on our schedule now. We are seeking acceptance in all the wrong places, though, with people. And people, the majority of people are not stable. And so you see the identity built on likability based on what other people think about you is an identity that will surely crumble when those very people no longer like you anymore. Try being likable as a journalist. That was my background. I was a journalist for over 10 years. I was a news reporter and a news anchor, and it was impossible to be likable by everyone. Yet, you needed to be likable enough for ratings. Talk about a tough balance. I would get emails all the time about the way I looked and the way I dressed, and so as I do this show now, and it's online, and people have things to say about the way that I look or I dress, I literally do not care. I'm like, this is like the oldest play in the book. Like, if that's all you're paying attention to, then you are vapid. You know what I'm saying? I don't care. People can have opinions about how I look. I have opinions about how other people look. We're all judging each other, right? But here's my point, right? Trying to be likable and relatable to everyone, it doesn't work. And we do that, you're not authentic. You're not authentically yourself. And so you get really confused about who you are. You get confused about your identity. Running after likability is a popularity contest that you will never win because being a people pleaser is no fun long term. maybe in the short term, but not long term. Not everyone will like you. I know, sucks. And someone will always misunderstand you. And why is that? Because we're all living in alternate realities. So your perception of me and what I'm saying is how you're internalizing what I'm saying and how you're internalizing how I'm showing up to you in terms of a mirror. I can't control that. If I am trying to control how you perceive me, that is going to be very exhausting. The only thing I can control and should focus on is my actual image. The only thing I should focus on improving and becoming better at is my actual authentic self-image. Make sense? If I am too focused on how other people will perceive me on whether I'm relatable to you, then it's like I have to guess what's in your mind. It's like I have to guess where you're from, what your background is, what your values are, the freaking traumas you had in your life. I got to guess all that. And it's impossible to guess what's going on with you to see how I'm going to show up to you and be relatable to you. So I might as well be myself. So not everyone is going to like you. And someone will always misunderstand you, and let them. Let them. Maybe you should feel what it's like not to be liked. Maybe you should feel what it's like to be misunderstood, because those feelings are going to force you to face yourself. Do I like myself? Do I misunderstand myself because I don't know myself, because I didn't bother to build a relationship with myself, because I was too busy trying to connect and build a relationship with everyone else but me? That's what I want you to ponder on today. Am I too relatable? That's the question I want you to ask yourself. Maybe half the reason we have problems, perhaps half the reason we suffer, is in an effort to be relatable to others. Think about that for a moment. Look at me. I too have gone through a difficult time. Look at me. I too have made mistakes. Look at me. I too insert suffering. How much of your problems, how much of your suffering and bondage is self-induced? Because you're afraid. You're afraid of what may happen on the other side of that pain. Maybe pain, anxiety, and fear is something that is familiar to you. Sure has been familiar to me all my life. And so the unfamiliar territory of joy, pleasure, peace, freedom, and not just joy sometimes and pleasure here and there and peace once in a while and freedom in moments, but I'm talking about it becoming familiar. Few obtain that. Few obtain the joy, the pleasure, the peace, the freedom, which now puts you in the unpopular crowd, because the majority of people are living in fear, anxiety, depression, and all the negative terms and negative emotions that we can describe. And so when you see someone living in full joy, when you see someone living in their authenticity, when you see someone experiencing freedom, what happens to the people that are feeling the exact opposite? They don't like that. So that now puts you in the unpopular crowd. We were taught to chase popularity at a very young age, were we not? Yes. But popularity is actually following the crowd. I used to think I wanted to be popular. Now I don't want to be popular at all. I'm used to not being popular, so hey, what the heck? The crowd doesn't need more people like itself. It's a crowd for a reason. It's crowded. The crowd is too crowded. You know what's better than relatability? Being different. You see, think about the word relatability. Here are some of the words that are similar or synonyms to relatability. Engaging, empathetic, responsive, sympathetic, understandable, and accessible. Oh, such beautiful words. All great characteristics. Don't we all seek to be more engaging? Don't we all seek, and aren't we all told to be more empathetic and be responsive and be sympathetic and understandable and be accessible to people? Of course. But what happens when we're too engaging? We don't have boundaries. What happens when we are too empathetic? We allow others to use their excuses to not progress. What happens when we're too responsive? We don't allow others to explore their own independence. What happens when we're too sympathetic? We get in the way of their healing. What happens when we are too understandable? We make way for victimhood mentality. The antonyms of the word relatable, relatability is distinguishable, distinct, various, varied, variable, varying, inaccurate, imprecise, different, unrelated, non-equivalent, diverse, unconnected, inexact, unlike, dissimilar. That's heavy. You see, it's not popular to be unrelatable because look at the labels that it comes with. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be labeled inaccurate. I don't want to be labeled imprecise. I don't want to be labeled unconnected. I certainly don't want to be labeled as unlike. Do you see where I'm going with this? You're going to be accused of being inaccurate. You may be called a liar. You will be accused of being different, unconnected, unlikable. That's what it means not to be relatable. That maybe you won't be liked. Can you handle being unlikable to some people, especially people you don't know, that you shouldn't care what they think about you, yet you do? What about you liking you? Isn't that what matters the most? Not that your parents are the most proud of you, but are you the most proud of yourself? So today's show is not about delivering a prescriptive. I don't have a formula to give you right now. I just want you to think about this for a moment as you go on about your day and as you go on about your week. The question of, am I too relatable? And what is that relatability costing me?